Welcome, everybody. It is Thursday. It is 10:30. This is Thinking on Paper. We have an amazing show planned for you today. Quite often, actually more often, I'm very fortunate to be at this really interesting intersection where two things that I love collide quite often. And I'm not sure how I make that happen, but I'm very fortunate enough to do so. And today is one of those days, one being the sport of lacrosse and the other being emerging tech. We are super excited about this show today. Mark, how are you doing? I believe you're out in Paris this week. Paris Blockchain, what's happening?
I'm at Paris Blockchain Week. I'm just taking shelter from the building the riots are about to start. So I'm just taking some cover, have a bit of a podcast before I go back out into the streets to find out. Now I'm at Paris Blockchain Week. It's been very interesting to get the inside track on the companies and the platforms building. I don't know if I've never been to a big conference like this before, and it's very interesting because there's kind of a lot of conversations going on, but there's a few conversations that appear every time there's a conversation. The kind of the crypto, the financial blockchain versus the cultural blockchain. And we're much more interested, I think, in the cultural side of it, the entertainment side of it. And Paris Blockchain Week has been a lot about DeFi and CeFi and the banking situation. So it's been interesting to have that insight. And lots of good merchandise, lots of hats, lots of socks. Do you know how you can tell how good a blockchain is doing? Is by the quality of the socks. So HBAR, they're not very good socks. Circle, who've obviously weathered a really incredible storm the last few weeks, have high quality socks. So yes. Also, you'll like this, Jeremy. Lots of writing journals.
Amazing. Nolan,
Worth
in
the entrance fee for that.
Awesome. Nolan Ether in the chat. And we'll do a quick intro with our amazing guest today, Brenden Coleman. But first, before I say that, I'm intrigued about socks as marketing swag. What if you wear pants? Like unless your legs are crossed or you wear kind of some roll up action, like there's not a lot of visibility in that billboard. What do you think, Mark?
No, I've got a lot of swag though. So I've got a big pile just here. I've got hats, yo-yos. Yo-yos was big this year. I've got a lot of yo-yos. Great for the kids. I don't know. I'm going to have to tell my kids about HBAR yo-yos, but I guess maybe that's why they do it. There's a lot of toys, and maybe the parents are telling their kids about Web3 and the blockchain with these toys. I quite like the idea.
I like it. Well, Mark, next week we expect you to wear all of your swag in our episode, and we'll go from there. Cheaty, holy cow, Cheaty, my friend in the chat, writing journals are life itself. So good to see your name in the chat, and you're 100% correct. All right, without further ado, guys, I want to introduce a very special guest, Brenden Coleman. Brenden is a former D1 lacrosse player. He is an entrepreneur in the tech space and now the VP of product and technology for the Premier Lacrosse League, one of my favorite sports organizations around right now. The best lacrosse in the world is played within this organization. And Brenden and I have got a chance to get to know each other over the last month and a half, especially kind of figuring out this whole Web3 thing together. He's got a lot of great insight into the space, into sports, into product development. So Brenden, welcome. We are so grateful to have you here, man. How's it going out west today?
It's going great. Really, really excited to be here and talk.
Amazing. Well, for the folks that don't know you, give us a quick background on you and how you went from a lacrosse athlete. And I know you went to the Air Force Academy, kind of a little bit about that and how you got into the tech space and entrepreneurship, and then how you landed at the PLL, and then we'll dive into that.
Yeah, I've had a pretty interesting path to get to where I am right now, and it really is all kind of through like innate curiosity. So yeah, like you said, I went to the Air Force Academy and played lacrosse there, so that's where the connection to lacrosse came from. And when I graduated, I ended up getting into I was a space operations officer, so in the used to be the Air Force, but now is the Space Force, and had a lot of fun there. And because I actually am part of the exclusive 4 ACL tear club. I was actually medically retired, and one door closes, another opens. Ended up starting or co-founding a apartment analytics company, and learned a ton from there. And you know, when I was approached with the Premier Lacrosse League, PLL for short, I knew that was definitely where I wanted to be, because of just the way that the league was looking to disrupt a pretty old school sports industry.
Awesome. Yeah. In its short history, you've done a lot of disruption, which is really cool. For those of us that don't know about the PLL, tell us a little bit about that.
And can we just like, so I'm sorry, I'm a football fan. I'm from England. We don't play lacrosse in England. So, and for the people in the chat who might not know lacrosse either, could you, just because it'll help me to understand the Web3 part of it, like just the basics of like how many people are on a team, and how many people go to a match? Like how big is the pro league in America? How many teams are there, and how many people go to the matches? And just a bit of a basic background on lacrosse.
Yeah,
Game.
so lacrosse itself is one of the oldest sports. It was actually, you know, first started in North America by the indigenous peoples. So there's a lot of history in lacrosse, dating back very far back, and so we try to really like implement that into what we do as a league as well. Lacrosse itself is pretty similar to hockey. Except for not on skates. There's 10 people on each side that are playing at a time, one of which is the goalie. Going into kind of like our league in general, so we're the professional league for the sport of lacrosse, outdoor lacrosse, and we're pretty unique in how we have it structured. The first part is we're a single entity, so we own all the teams, which has been really valuable for us to be able to innovate and move quickly, and you know, be able to make these decisions to disrupt without having a lot of the blockers there. And we're also tour based, and the reason why we're tour based is to really try to bring the sport of lacrosse to different parts of the country. We're predominantly North American, but growing internationally really quickly as well. Do you have any specific questions on Mark on some of the aspects of lacrosse?
Just like from a community point, how many people would go to a match? Like, is this comparable to any of the other sports? Is it thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds?
Yeah, so we've definitely had tens of thousands at venues before, and we're like growing really quickly, so that number is just going to keep going. It's one of the fastest growing sports in North America, and you know, like I said, internationally, we're seeing a lot of excitement around there as well.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yeah, on the international side too, the PLL just got back from a big event in Japan, or a big series of events in Japan, where what was it, like a Japanese national team that you guys competed against, or how did that structure get set up?
Yeah, so we brought some of the PLL All-Stars, and the PLL All-Stars played a Japanese national team, and we were really shocked at just the excitement in lacrosse in Japan. It's one of those that like we've kind of identified as a emerging market, but we're really shocked at the turnout and just how excited, and the performance of the Japanese team was really great as well.
Yeah, I thought so too. And you know, Mark, another thing, it's one of these sports that, you know, a lot of us tend to call the fastest sport on 2 feet. The ball is a you know, really compact rubber ball. You throw it around stick to stick, and you know, the ball can move hundreds of miles an hour, whether it's a shot or a pass. And it's a really quick, fast paced game. Really exciting to watch.
And quite aggressive or violent. I was quite surprised just before we came on air. You were talking about your injuries, and I didn't realize it was so. I guess if the ball's hard and moving at 200 miles an hour, then yeah, you're going to get some injuries.
Yeah, a lot of people I talk to that haven't really been introduced in the sport, one of the things they really get fixated on is just like how hard you know, defenders are hitting you as you're like running around like with the stick essentially. So it's definitely a violent game, a really exciting game as well.
Brilliant.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's dive in a little bit into kind of the PLL and, you know, the charge and strategy that you started building when you came on, because you were a kind of a tech entrepreneur that had an organization, a lot of product development stuff that you've been doing over the course of your career, and then you jumped into the PLL. You know, what was the mission? It was like, all right, Brenden, here's what we need. You know, here's what we want to do, and you know, take me from there.
Yeah, I mean, just generally speaking, the mission has always been how do we get closer to the fans, and how do we enable fans to be more integrated in what we do and feel like they're a part of it, and how do we use technology to get there? So we're extremely, you know, even in our mission to you know, like, trailblaze the future of professional sports that is fan and player led, like that right there just really drives, like, we're really trying to make professional sports more integrated in what the fan is really excited about. And you know, like, we always talk about, like, without fans, like, we just would cease to exist. So we're always thinking about how to, you know, satisfy what fans are really looking for, but as well as, like, make them feel like they're more part of you know, building the league itself, and part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got on a little riff in the pre-show and a little bit in the chat thread about this idea of, like, the new age fan. So if we were to kind of make that new age fan a character, right, and give them characteristics and tendencies and all of that, like, what if we were to build the profile of the new age fan? What do they expect? What do they get excited about? And how does that help you develop your product?
Yeah, so I'd say the two biggest things, and there's multiple levels to this, right? But the two biggest things that I think characteristics of a new age fan is, one, they expect optionality. So one thing we're seeing with, you know, like, just watching sports, like, they want different ways to watch it, they want different angles to watch it, they want different ways to consume the same exact type of content. And it is really dependent, because there's so many different reasons why you are a fan of a team or fan of a sport. They care about different things. So the one would be optionality, and the other one would be like interactive. They want to be able to interact. Like, forever, pro sports has been essentially pro sports broadcasts a game at you and you just consume it. And this new age fan is more just like, they want to be interacting with the broadcast. They want to be interacting with you know, everything that involves professional sports. And so we're really looking at, how do we make just the idea of being a fan more interactive, making things more interactive while they're watching these like alternate screens, alternate experiences while you're watching the game. So those are, like, the two main characteristics, I think, that separate a new age fan from your traditional sports fan.
On that, so kind of player cams, multiple angles, maybe. Are you borrowing from different sports and different leagues? Because I know, like, the Premiership and Sky Sports in the UK, they have innumerable ways to watch. You can watch one player, you can watch two players, you can watch a position of the pitch, you can watch from a bird's eye view, you can watch from behind the goal, from the high up in the stands. Is this something, or when you say interactive and immersive, do you include other virtual components as well?
Yeah, so there's a lot of, like, things to unpack around that. So I'll start with just, like, the consumption. So we pull from a lot. So there's really successful things like the ESPN's you know, Manning cast, right? It's like, some people prefer that type of commentary to it over, like, the more professional type commentary. But then you have those that are, like, very interested in the, you know, the beauty of the game and strategy of the game and all that, and that's where, like, they may prefer more of the you know, in American football, the like Tony Romo commentators, where he gets really deep into plays and all that as well. But then you have, like, on the other side, and I know the NFL does this with Twitch, is that there's people that really enjoy a Twitch streamer, and they've been experimenting with Twitch streamers actually being the commentators as well. So it's really just that type of optionality when it comes to, like, viewing the game. And then the other side of the interaction side is kind of just like everyone has their phone out while they're watching a game. Like it's really, really hard now to get someone to just be fully locked into a game without looking at their phone. And so, you know, there's aspects, I know, like from like a betting standpoint, there's live betting. We're experimenting with, you know, just other aspects inside of our app that you can kind of participate with on a community base of, like, you know, we have this game day chat in Discord where it's highly active during games because fans just have this longing to like talk about the plays in like a stream of consciousness with other fans that are just as passionate about them.
For sure.
Yeah, I think one thing too that I've always found super interesting is, you know, the under the helmet concept that you guys had. So one of the big moments in the game is the face off, right? There are two guys basically battling to get the ground ball. They have two wings that come in on the outside as well. So it's like it's a scrum, it's a battle. And they would have the mic on the guy who just scooped it up and scored a goal, and you hear the immediate reaction from the player as if you were on the sidelines with the player. And it was
that sounds cool.
Really, really. I mean, I'm just thinking of the Trevor Baptiste, you know, the early on when he, you know, scooped and scored, and he went right to it and started talking about it. I mean, that's the access you're talking about. It's a unique form of access and feel like you're a part of the team in a way, right?
Yeah, and we see fans like really want to know not just like, you know, the performance of players, but just the personal aspects of the players. And we have like really, really, you know, funny personas of players that we want to highlight, which is what attracts a lot of fans to, like, I'm a favorite player for this because you know, the interviews, he's great in the interviews. You know, like I follow him on social and just love what he's doing on social as well. So yeah, just that like personal connection that fans want to have with players as well. We've been really trying to highlight that.
Absolutely. So, all right. So let's pivot. So we've kind of defined the concept of this new age fan. We know technology can be super helpful in building new connections between the league and the fans. When you first heard about Web3, tell me about your initial reaction, and then the kind of the nudge that made you jump off the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'd say, and I know this term gets thrown around a lot, but like just this idea of ownership where, like I said, we wouldn't exist without our fans. And so giving the fans more ownership is something that really attracted me to Web3. You know, with Web2 concepts, right? Like it's just a very like pretty conceptual thing that the more ownership a fan feels or user feels, the more sticky they are to your product, or the more like interested they are in spreading the word and feeling like they're like part of building it.
Yep. 100% agree. So the idea of this tech enabled ownership is like, all right, this seems really interesting. You jumped in, you started learning, you were writing about it early. You do a lot of writing as well to process kind of the things that the ideas in your head. You've got a great blog that you put out that I jump on a bunch. Tell me about the first experiment. I guess, was it the Premier Pass, or did you guys do something before that?
So we did something like pretty early on called the Owners Pass. And again, it was this idea of, you know, if you have the Owners Pass, like you get a lot of benefits of, you know, being able to like get tickets to the game. And one like really interesting one was you bought the Owners Pass based on the team. And so if the team did win the championship, you end up getting like a similar ring to what the player did. So that was really early on, and like we learned a lot through that. I'd say our biggest foray into Web3 was the Premier Pass. So I can go into that if we want to start with that.
I think
I was just looking at the Premier Pass, and like I'm looking forward to getting into it. I like one of the selling points, or one of the utilities of it, I should say rather, was holders, which, and I really like this because it could go in many different ways depending on how this is set up, which is what I'm going to ask. But holders determining the rules. Like, did I read that? Did I understand that correctly? Whereby there might be changes to the rules of the game that the holders could vote on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go into that. Like kind of the ideation of the Premier Pass was just this idea to allow fans to, you know, forever fans have been wanting to influence, you know, their favorite sport and all that stuff. And so we wanted to find a way that could allow fans to actually have like tangible influence. And so the concept was, you know, we released the Premier Pass for free because we wanted to make sure that we were attracting people that cared about the utility that comes behind it, and not people that were just speculating, hey, I can make a quick dollar, because it's just not a very powerful community to create if it's based on like financial status. And so released it for free. We had all 3,500 claimed. And with that, we essentially had a list of rules that we could implement in the All-Star game. And holders of the Premier Pass were able to vote on it. And no matter what the result of those 5 rules were, the top 2 were implemented. So that was giving full power to fans, where it wasn't like, hey, you know, vote on these and we'll consider it. It was vote on these and the top 2 are being implemented. And it ended up being like really interesting implementations for the All-Star game. One of which was moving, we have like a 2-point line similar to the like the basketball 3-point line. We have a 2-point line, which is at 15 yards out. And one of the rules was to move it to 13 yards. And so we were able to actually like test something that we've been kind of experimenting with and internally being like, hey, should we move it closer? We were able to test it in the All-Star game, and actually then did implement it in one of our off-season tournaments because of how effective it was in the All-Star game.
Yeah, and speaking on the fan side of this, I jumped in because I was not only curious, because you and I had talked about what you were planning to do on the Premier Pass, but you know, I jumped in as a fan, and the experience was really cool. And I've actually used it as an example for other brands trying to figure out what to do with Web3, because everyone was really hung up, especially early on, hung up on the value of the thing that they put out. And if it wasn't like tradable, or, you know, secondary market was like this big thing, it's not about that. It's about this persistent connection that you're building with your fans, and that you can automate and do great things with it. And I got it. And I was just blown away. Like every little bit, it was like, oh yeah, help us figure out the rules to the All-Star game. I was like, what? Like, I think just the surprise and delight aspect of that was really, really clever, I thought.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting thing to kind of key in on, is around, you know, as my like product mind runs, basically like what I found out is fans, users, they don't really care about like the technology being used, as long as it just creates a better experience for themselves. And so one of the parts was we wanted to make sure that fans were able to, you know, get onboarded without having like some of the like issues of like Web3 onboarding, of creating a wallet, all that stuff. And so that's where we were able to use a service to have where they could use their email to log in, and we ended up paying for all the gas. So we had like gasless transactions so that we could reduce all that friction to actually claim the pass. And that like really helped, because then we were able to deliver the value to fans without them having to try to figure out. And, you know, once we deliver that value, then those that were new to Web3, which I think about 43% of them were, like they were now like, okay, now I want to learn more about this world. I want to understand it better. And now they're kind of hooked.
You should have been at Paris Blockchain Week, Brenden, because like did you say 40% of the people were new to Web3? So it was their first experience of an NFT, or their first experience of it. I mean, a lot of the conversation the last couple of days has been about, as it always is, like removing the friction, making it seamless, making it easy, making the end product viable. You were doing it 9 months ago with success, even though it sounds like the way to do it was wasn't exactly seamless behind the scenes, but making it seamless for the people interacting is awesome to hear that it can work.
Yeah, and our goal is essentially that, you know, if you use a Web3 enabled aspect of any of our products, like the hope is that you don't even know you're doing it. That's where we want to get to. And that I think is where, you know, the Web3 world has kind of gotten smart around is like, hey, like it really doesn't matter about the technology. It really matters about creating a better experience for fans. And there's a lot of friction that we need to reduce. And there are a lot of, companies out there trying to solve that right now as well. But yeah, it's all about like, like it's the concept that like you have this ownership, you have more influence, all that really matters and resonates with a fan. And so like it doesn't really matter if it's Web 2, Web 3, like to in the eyes of the fan.
Yeah, I think early on too, when we first started talking about just Web3 and tech and all of that stuff, you brought up a really good point. And let's unpack that a little bit for other people other brands, other organizations trying to set a Web3 strategy or set an emerging tech strategy, is the product manager mindset to all of this stuff. It can't just be this drop in the bucket. You're building an extension of your product that you want to last over time. So talk to me about the product manager's mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say one thing like we really thought about, right, is and I did write about this as well, that it has to be a significant, if there's going to be friction, which there is always going to be a little bit for now, it has to improve the fan or users experience significantly in order for them to stop using the other option that they have. And so it really needs to be like more focused on not the technology, but more like how this technology solves that end user's problem better than what they're already doing. And so what a lot of, I think, the Web3 world ran into and realized that is because at the current state, there is a little bit more introduced friction. They weren't able to create like a experience or value that was significantly better than what a fan already or a user already has. And so it was making it harder for, adoption of that for that. And so they kind of iterated into the like pretty low-hanging fruit value of potentially making money off of this, right? So that's where you kind of saw that a lot of things just shifted to that idea of, the speculators coming in, figuring out how to like make a quick buck, or all the articles going out about like this person bought at this and sold it at this much higher.
Yeah, it's super interesting that there's almost like this new value equation, right? So you have this desired new functionality or capability, or that you're going to offer your audience. Is the ease of use of the technology to get to the end result worth the end result? Is the end result that much cooler, or is it kind of meh and you're in the soup of this mud of trying to get to the desired end result, right? There's a balancing act there.
Yeah, it's almost like a little bit of a ratio around just like the friction to, one, get someone off what they're currently using, because there's moats that are created there. And the other one is like, as that friction decreases, then the incremental value you need to add on like doesn't have to be as high. But right now with that friction, and there's always going to be friction because of that moat that the other like solution is creating. But as that friction decreases, then the incremental value that you need to provide, isn't as needed to be as large.
Got it. Yeah. Some quick shouts in the chat too. Chidi is a heck of a product manager as well. Got a lot of years in the space. Would love your thoughts on some of this stuff too. So Mark, as a new lacrosse fan, we're going to call you a new lacrosse fan, new PLL fan. What would you be excited about from a new audience member perspective as far as access and interaction?
I like, going back to what I was saying, I really like the idea of the rule changes. I mean, and also being closer, one of the things that they do in rugby union in Europe and actually far afield is the ref is mic'd up. And I would like to see players mic'd up because the ref, so you can hear whenever there's a problem, you can hear the ref talking, and you can hear the ref talking to the VAR. I don't know if you're familiar with VAR. We have these instant replays where there's a fourth referee off the pitch. You can hear their conversations and how they reach the decision about why it's a foul or why it's not a foul. And that's really cool. And I'm interested in that. And obviously the referees that they mind their language, and it'd be really entertaining to have mics on the players and maybe hear what the players are saying to the ref when the ref says it's not a foul, or vice versa. I like that part of it. I've got a thing on the ownership, because we're talking about ownership a lot, and looking at this as a new lacrosse fan, I'm also looking at it as like you own all the teams in the league. Now, for me, that's something which doesn't happen in the UK. All the teams are individually owned, and I wonder if there is an opportunity or a point of friction between ownership and what the teams can do individually with this emerging tech, whereby the teams could create their own relationships with the communities. But if you, as the governing body, own those teams, is that an opportunity, or is that a barrier to what the emerging tech can do to bring communities closer to the teams?
Yeah, so I'll start with the ref comment. So we actually are really fortunate that we have personalities when it comes to refs. We actually sell a ref jersey, and it's pretty popular because of how like we like to mic up the refs, but they're just characters in their own, and so there's a little bit of a cult following with some of our refs inside of our fan base. So it's really interesting comment there. You had that, and we've leaned in pretty heavily just because they're super entertaining.
That's good.
On the ownership side of things, like we have essentially the teams kind of operate pretty autonomously, and so we have like dedicated pods to each team, and so it's very possible, and we have this already where teams kind of run their own personality, their own like type of how they operate, and it's kind of just solo from the league, and then the league just allows them to we support where we can. So it's definitely possible where a single team can have one type of like NFT that they release, and another team can have a totally different one. Although we own all the teams, it still can be there's still competitive nature in between, and they're able to run autonomously as well.
Okay.
Yeah, one interesting thing, and I'm gonna throw out my our thinking on paper patented term, bidirectional value exchange. It's just a goofy mechanic that we've kind of been rooting on, but the idea is you establish these connections between the PLL and the fans, and you're able to activate, elevate, automate action between them, right? So instead of being this broadcast mechanic, there's value coming from both ways. So what's the most interesting thing you've seen bubble up in Discord as an idea or as an execution or something to take the PLL in a new direction or a different direction or a fun one?
Yeah, so I'm like pretty obsessed with this idea of like accruing benefits in pro sports. So if you kind of look at it, right, like there's pockets of a way to accrue benefits as a sports fan, but it's not as like it's not as prevalent as it is in other industries where, and what I mean by accruing benefits, I mean like essentially you as a 10-year fan of this team, like you typically get treated the same as a fan that is like 1 or 2 years a fan. And so what we're trying to explore is how do we like create ways to accrue for a fan to accrue these benefits and just essentially reward their loyalty for being a fan and being a fan over time. And so that entails essentially like ways to actually be able to better measure like a fan's passion. A lot of like conversations we have with other leagues are like, they're like, hey, once you're a fan, you're always a fan. The way we look at it is more like on a degree of fan passion, right? Because you can always say that you're a fan of a team, but your passion may kind of decrease over time. And so we actually look at trying to measure like fanhood based on just like a passionate fan, which is not an easy thing to do. But we're currently in the works of building a more like gamified system to really like reward those that are contributing to the fan base, not only just like consuming PLO content or all that, but also being like a maven of the game and recruiting others into be like lacrosse fans and be PLO fans as well.
That's really interesting. So my science brain starts going all over the place, like the quantification of passion related to sports, right? And not just the validation or proof of fandom, but the degree of which that fandom is calculated. Like, so I don't want to go into like the weeds of your code and stuff, but just philosophically, like how do you start to draw a circle around that and assign value?
Yeah, I mean, the big question we had to ask was like, what makes a fan a fan? Which is a very difficult thing to answer. But you know,
it's very subjective at times as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we've kind of done is try to use like qualitative information around like feedback from fans, and again that idea of like building in the open, being able to like get feedback of like why a fan is a fan, what their motivations are. There's so many different types of motivations. You look at like parents, they want to like you know, continue to like interact with their kids and utilize like sports as a way to do that. But then you have, you know, the kid that is interested in this aspect. And so there's so many different reasons why you're a fan. And the more that we can kind of get and gather and then measure over time, the better we can be at it. Like, I'll fully disclose, like there's no way we'll get this perfect, right? But there are a lot of ways to get better than it is now. So, and over time, like we can continue to learn and iterate, but it's a very difficult thing we're trying to figure out. But you know, it's all rooted in our obsession with like creating more passion with that fan.
Well, on that note, so it's a brilliant question. It's a brilliant thought experiment for Jeremy to get his mind into over the next few days. Is how do you measure your enthusiasm and passion for a sports team? I think it's awesome. I guess, have you been thinking, like from the tech side of it, about soulbound tokens and dynamic NFTs? And if you could ever come to a consensus on how you measure the passion, then have you thought about incorporating into with soulbound tokens and the NFTs specifically?
Yeah, so we kind of look at what Starbucks is doing with their loyalty program. It's definitely different, but just this idea of it's built into a system that has already been really powerful. And so what we are really focused on is building this gamification system, and then there's going to be tons of ways we can integrate Web3 concepts into it, but not build it specifically for Web3. Like, we're focused on creating a really, really great gamification system and then utilizing Web3 concepts to just make it that much better, which it can. But without having this like large fan base of like really active users of this system, it's going to be hard to make any type of NFT like that valuable to the fan. But totally, like, you know, we're exploring things like, you know, performance-based NFTs where you hit certain levels, you gain that NFT. And so now like fans feel like they've like earned that, and it's still exclusive in that like there's only a certain amount because of just the performance-based aspect of it. And then we're also kind of looking at, you know, like player cards, like being able to build those up and do things that you're already doing as a fan, but we're getting rewarded for doing it.
So on the gamification side, are you looking at building things in, you know, using engines like Unreal and that sort of thing to drive an automation of the gaming mechanic, or is this more outside of that realm?
Yeah, so just like the basic concept of it is like things that our fans are already doing, like consuming content, participating in, you know, our free to plays, all that. Like they should, fantasy, right? They should get credit for, you know, participating in that, recruiting others to that, and so they can build their level that way. We have a larger kind of view on gaming and how important gaming is going to be and how integrated it is going to be with sports in the future. So that's a whole nother conversation, but you know, to keep it simplified, like it's really just gamifying the journey from a new fan to a really passionate fan, which also helps with like kind of giving those that are new to the sport of lacrosse, essentially that we kind of talk about how it's like, if a friend has ever introduced you to a new sport, like they kind of like hold your hand through, hey, like you would probably like this team because they have this type of theme. Here's some things to look into based on that. Like, we want to try to be that friend for that new fan and really like help them build that journey through like, all right, I want to love this sport. I want to be a passionate fan. How do I do it?
Yeah, almost like these advocates, right? Or these like, yeah, they could just walk you in and get you familiar without having the daunting task of doing it on your own. I think that's really, really cool and helpful. So we did have a question in the chat or a comment in the chat. So my friend Chidi, who I've mentioned a couple of times, he's a product manager. He's done a lot in launching businesses in Africa and teaching business business skills and MBA programs in African schools. It's amazing. Do you guys have you guys looked at Africa as an emerging market, or any countries within Africa as an emerging market? Or what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I mean, we're always keeping our eyes out on emerging markets, and part of what we're trying to do, especially in Jeremy, you'll this is like in your wheelhouse as well, is like making the sport of lacrosse more accessible to youth. So one thing, and there's other sports that have this issue, like hockey, where you know, Mark, for football, basically you need a ball and a net to be able to participate. Same thing with basketball. You just need to go to a public court with a basketball and you're good. But with lacrosse, like, you need equipment. You need a lot of like you know, other aspects of it. You need to find a net. And so we're doing things like something called Goals for Greatness, where we're dropping goals in different areas, starting with the US, and being able to just make lacrosse more accessible. We have other plans on how to like get more we call it like sticks in hands, to allow for people that don't, or youth players that don't understand what lacrosse is, to just experiment. So on that side of things, like with other emerging countries, we're trying to really solve of how to get sticks in hands in the youth space, to then kind of ignite that passion for lacrosse. And that is the one blocker that has kind of stalled us from really emerging in other countries like or, you know, more like, you know, Rwanda and all that. But we're trying to solve that. So yeah, any ideas that Chidi has, I'm open to hear about it.
You guys should definitely talk. You guys should definitely get together. I can link it up. But yeah, the interesting thing you mentioned. So I still play in, you know, in adult league. I'm JV coach at my high school, and I run the youth program. And the biggest thing that I see in recruiting new players is they're athletes in other sports, but when you put a stick in their hand, they're reluctant because they don't want to. They're a successful athlete in another sport, and this getting over the hump of throwing and catching, it doesn't take long, but initially it's like, oh man, I don't want to look silly. I'm a star athlete in this other sport. You know, that I've found that as, you know, converting people into it. But once you get them in, it's like insatiably hooked, you know? Well, guys, we are trying to always be mindful of time. I'm sure we could unpack a lot of things. Maybe we could do another round too, Brenden, but this has been a fascinating conversation. Do you want to leave us with any thing you're excited about that your group within the PLL has going on, or the PLL in general? And then we'll put links and make sure everyone knows where to go to find out everything about it.
Yeah, I would say, and this is definitely helpful for Mark as well, we have a really awesome documentary that was created on and it's right now on Hulu and ESPN Plus, that kind of details the building of the league. Our co-founders were really smart about kind of filming everything from start to finish, and it's a really, really good way to introduce yourself to the Premier Lacrosse League and the sport of lacrosse as well.
That's the fate of the sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fate of a sport. Yeah.
Fate of a sport. Yeah. We'll get a link posted. That's amazing. My partner in crime, Mark, always has some great last minute hot button questions. Mark, are you prepared? And Brenden, are you prepared?
Let's do it.
So again, sometimes I have some hot buttons and sometimes I don't. And because I think there's probably other more interesting things. So as a new lacrosse fan, so I can go on YouTube and find out the top of lacrosse. Who is the Michael Jordan? Who is the Lionel Messi of lacrosse? Like who is the best lacrosse player that's ever lived? Or who is the Michael
dangerous
Jordan
question, right?
Very dangerous. I mean,
and do you agree?
I'll say a little bit of a bias, but I think it's totally Paul Rabel, who is actually a co-founder of our league. He has the most
Do you agree,
points
Jeremy?
in outdoor lacrosse. Yeah.
I would agree from a performance perspective, but also from a steward of the sport and what him and his brother have done to build the league and bring the 150 best players around the world to play in that league. I think he's probably the guy to start with. I would recommend. Yeah.
Okay. And who's the which team? Who's the Boston Celtics of the 60s or the Bulls of the 90s? Which is the lacrosse team that has done the most damage to every other team?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, I'd probably have to lean towards the Whip Snakes lacrosse club. They've tried to start a little bit of a dynasty, and they're a really, really talented team. There's a lot of movement this year on the free agent side, so we'll see if they can continue. But yeah, they've been pretty dominant. You know, haven't really seen it in like championship side of things. They have, I believe, 2, but they have been pretty dominant if you look at it kind of across regular season as well.
I'll just have to insert Roll Woods in there just to show my allegiance. But yeah, Jim Brown in the comments. I saw that multi-sport athlete. Jim Brown was a great lacrosse player. Come to find out, I saw a little, this was a couple of years ago, but I think Paul Rabel went and filmed Tom Brady's kid playing in a lacrosse game a while back that I saw. And, you know, Drew Brees' kids play lacrosse. It's making its way through for sure. And we hope to see further success by the disruptor that is the PLL and kind of the core disruptor within the PLL org is with tech is you, Brenden. So thanks for joining us today. Really insightful, always happy to, you know, have a platform to talk about, you know, lacrosse and what you guys are doing, but thanks for the insight as well.
Yeah, appreciate it. Love coming on here. Definitely Jim Brown. That's a really good one as well. I think I'd be convinced, like with a bunch of others, we're still trying to figure that out. New players every year seem to be just becoming dominant and more dominant. So yeah, really excited about being on this. Like I really enjoyed my time here.
Amazing. And thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll post some links to that documentary, a couple other links about the PLL. Mark, any closing thoughts before we put you back into the basement of the Louvre at Paris Blockchain Week?
I've got to get there first. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's explosions outside my window because like you have to, when you get home, not connected to Web3, just have a look at what's happening in Paris today. And then I'm in the middle of it and I have to get through it to get back to Blockchain Week. For me personally, this is what I love doing about this show is the interesting, you don't get these conversations in like mainstream Web3. And I really love having and learning about things that you don't traditionally hear about. So thank you. It's been cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, guys. Thanks to everyone. And look forward to seeing y'all next week. Take care.